Hello, my name is Juha Salinen, and I'm from GDPR Tech. And today in this webinar, we are going to talk about unstructured data and the risks which are relating AI implementation. What are the typical unstructured data management challenges? Is that we users are creating the files, storing those in different places. And this means all the files, spreadsheets, documents, mails, listings from databases, dumps from CRM applications and others. And this means that kind of data which is defined by any model or architecture. This is about 80% of the organizational data is unstructured. There's various studies by various sources like IDC and Gartner regarding that area. And one of the things regarding unstructured data management and then challenges on that is we people manage them. We search the files, we protect the files, and we use different applications like file servers, Teams, online services, Box, Dropbox, Slack, WhatsApp, and so on, emails, and so on. And this means that there is multiple places which might contain almost anything within that. Going into AI areas, what kind of issues there might be within the organizational files. We come back on the AI area a little bit later on the next slide. A few time ago, there was a case, breach case, where a major city was hacked, basically, and they were pretty big in the headlines within that. And of course, our target within the customer environments is to avoid the headlines not being breached in the first place. And there are issues within the unstructured files was unstructured data within itself and poor classification. There was multiple files, multiple means here hundreds of thousands of files were stored in a file server and where it shouldn't be by the guidance. And there was no clear overview what was compromised. In the first place, when the hacking was openly media, organization said to media that there was no personal files involved in the case, so no personal data was breached. Within a week, week after week, they came with different numbers. First, like I said, no personal data in the first place. Then they changed that. Maybe there was something personal data of the employees. Later, they came back with a number of how large the environment was. Comparing that, there was basically hundreds of thousands of files, and out of that, roughly about 200,000 employees and citizens' information was breached. Also, underage, meaning that there was information of children, which was breached. The reason for this was outdated systems and lack of monitoring that. And then there was basically one unpatched remote access service. That's the root cause of that. But then the result of that, why all this happened was there was lack of awareness, lack of responsibility, like employees were unaware of proper data storage policies where the information could be stored. And so therefore, within the file servers, there was plenty of information which shouldn't be there in the first place. Now, something what we see over all the customer environments, covering Finland, covering Nordic countries, covering Baltic region, European countries, and global companies. This is not like anything new. And one of the challenges within that is when you come back into AI uses the data, what is accessible to the user. Now, what this means within that, we have here as an example of Microsoft Copilot environment. Within the Copilot environment, let's open this a little bit. We as a user, we use devices. End device could be like a laptop or mobile phone. Then we use those applications within that. Let that be a browser, for example, Edge, Word, Excel, or Outlook within that. Then we have a Copilot as block here, or the box here. the Copilot uses through the Microsoft Graph, which is basically a network within that, which has access all the data what that individual user have access on. Now, if the user have access also not to his or her individual data, but also the company data within that, then the graph will have access on that, then the Copilot will have access on that, then the applications on the end user device will have access on that. Now, simply say, if you have access to your data within the company organizational data, which is openly accessed to a user, containing, for example, HR information, containing any kind of information which shouldn't be there, then the Copilot will have access on that. Well, one of the simple tests within that is to have one user, as a normal user, test that with one Copilot license to see what kind of issues we might have. You can use, for example, within the end device or the application, be that a Copilot application or be that a Excel or anything, look for example, ask from the Copilot, please show me all the HR documents, or use, for example, your birth date, or the start of that. So all the documents which contain the numbers like 27, 11, 70, like for if somebody's birth date would be that. And so all the documents which contain that string. Then if there's any issues, then the Copilot will find that, because Copilot will have access files through that. Now, this is the challenge. And let's see a couple of stories. What kind of stories we have over the years, what we have done, data assessments. So how real is the issue here? Is this should be alert, worrying? This is something like what, for example, Microsoft is saying that aware of this, per Microsoft and privacy guidance, you should know before the AI implementation. Like in this case, the AI could be Copilot, it could be any other AI, like one of the large language models that would be Microsoft models or Google model. You should know your data, what you have. That is directly from the Microsoft guidance. Know your data, where the data is stored, what kind of data you have, and then protect the data. Know the fact who has access on that. Have you actually tested that? Who has access on that? And then the privacy law is for example, GDPR is stating that data retention part of that, how long you should have the data with that. Now, what we see and have seen over the years is there's a lot of organizations which actually doesn't monitor the data retention times. It might be not even defined by themselves. This application, how long the data should be there, and the laws are actually varying. For example, in Finland, the typical HR information is defined. Let's say applicants of the employee applicants information typically it's you store that, let's say, 1.5 years, maybe, and then if the employee leaves the organization, there's a time limit for that, typically 10 years. In a Baltic region, for example, that information, HR information, is to be kept 60 years or 50 years. Now you should understand as organization, define that time, how long to keep the data, and then monitor that and actually do mitigations based on that if there's deviations. Now, here's a story of an agency company, what we did a couple of years back. We run a data assessment for the company against their file servers. Now, what is really typical is that from the file servers moving into a cloud, those data stores could be moved as is directly to the cloud. Now the file server content, like shares like H drive or server/project, we run a data assessment. The organization wanted to know what's there. Now, their chief information security officer, CISO, wanted to do this together with us, but that CISO wanted to ask from the legal department if this is okay to do that. Is there any legal exceptions that we couldn't do that, or anything regarding that? Now, legal department replied, okay, it can be done, but there are no files, any files containing personal data, because it has been instructed not to store any on these file servers. This is a good, it has been instructed, it has been said that you shouldn't store anything in their file server. We found out in this data assessment, we found out it was basically, it's still the worst access management case ever. And on top of that, there was plenty of files containing, for example, social security numbers, HR applications, HR information, and all that kind of information. And it was thousands of such documents, mostly open access to all users. And we started from here. Can we do this? The answer from the legal department, there's nothing. What we found out, there was plenty. How plenty? Let's take a look at that. This is an overview of that. Within that, this is just graph out of that. Let's say we have information files containing HR information is this size of block. Here's a block containing HETU 50, which means there is at least 50 individual unique Finnish social security numbers in each individual file, and the number of files is over 4,000. So we have more than 4,000 files containing at least 50 SSNs, each unique ones. And if you compare that into this block, which contains GDPR information, and so on, there's plenty. So thousands of files containing information which shouldn't be there at all, because it has been instructed not to store anything. On top of that, there was major data protection issues by the security side of that. Here's access right. This path here says that this is a file server path. 15 is common around here. Transfers and then a test. And test contained a lot of SSNs, a lot of HR information within that. And then there's actually the domain users had access on this. So basically, order organization users had access on that. And then the authenticated users had actually read access on that. They tried to use denied rights, trying to fix the access right. But this has, and still is the worst access case wherever. It's really difficult to see from this kind of information who actually at the end of the day has access or not. This is one part of that which should be really cleaned. This is the security part. Privacy part of that, there's things which shouldn't be there in the first place. Story around here is a story of multinational accounting company. We are talking about finance, we are talking about bookkeeping and so on. It was a pilot. It was a pilot for file servers and M360 files, so cloud and file servers within the scope. And later we run a data cleaning for the company, removing basically about 5.6 million files out of that based on the rules like older than 10 years and so on. What we found in the pilot, it was only about 11 terabytes of files. In average, 1 terabyte is about 1 million files. In this case, it was over 75 million files. And if you think about going through 75 million files manually, asking the organization units to go through your files, this is a very daunting task. Nobody will do this manually. We went through this data using the tools that we use in this kind of assessment and data management services. And we found there's, of course, 75 million files is also something. If you move a large number of files, in this case small files, into a new environment, it will take more time because the transfer of the small files is slower in general. One of the biggest issues in this case and relating to AI, in AI case, before we back into AI will have access on what the user have access. We found out one place from the customer environment, which in this case was product data in the SharePoint site. So this is a Microsoft environment, SharePoint online. There should be HR business units information, products, why we looked a little bit deeper this site was because we found there was plenty of social security numbers stored in there within the files. And when we went through the path deeper, there was products, product name, treasures. So there should be just brochures of their products. But then there was customer projects, and then there was one customer, which was actually one of their end customer, and they're actually their salary information of each individual user. It was stored in totally wrong place. You think about implementing AI in this kind of place. You think that your data is correct, your access rights are correct, and you put any AI here and think about, let's go our brochures, let's go our product data, but then there's also personal data down here. So this is one of the obvious risks. You should know your data. You should know your access rights, which was in the earlier case. You should know your data in also here. Top of that, we also find things like this. This is not a movie company. They are not making any films. So there was also the media stored, in this case, file server. It's down here under a service desk information was stored information, which obviously is basic copyrighted video in the wrong place. Story of a city and their education environment. In this case, this is all M365, so this cloud environment. Once again, know your data. This is one of the biggest cities in Finland, and we run through a data assessment for the city's data sources and later the education tenant. And the education tenant itself, it contained quite a lot of information stored in the files, which obviously were CV documents of applications related to students and evaluations documents, and they were shared to others. In this case, how bad online environment is very typical to Microsoft and Google environments in the cloud. You can easily share information with others. In this case, there was plenty of external users. In this case, almost 3,000. External links, in this case, was actually was pretty high, and there it has been dropping down here, a little bit lower. 65 external links, and then about 24,000 sensitive items. Out of the scope, which is really relevant and interesting here, is only about a few hundred files containing that kind of information, which shouldn't be there stored in the first place. But which is really worrying here is that within the external links, there's also external users with access to those files. So once again, go into a cloud, go into AI without knowing your data. Let's see this kind of risks, and this is typically what we see in all organizations. Now, coming back to a question, AI use the data, which is accessible to the user. Who actually should define who has access? And the answer for this is not IT. IT cannot know that. It should be the organization unit. Would it be HR? Would it be any business finance units and so on? Like finance units, they have different retention times for the data and so on. So units should define who has access on that data. Might help with the question of who should define where to store the data. Would that be an application like CRM application, HR application, file server, maybe a cloud environment and so on. So usually have a playbook kind of information, simple information, where to store the information. In this case, I have HR information, where to store that. HR information goes into HR application and so on. How long to keep that? That's also the question of that. Who should define how long to keep the data? Once again, IT is not the answer. IT can help with tools like, for example, Microsoft Review. You can define retention times there. But some of the business units should help the IT to define the retention time, how long to keep the data. So to wrap this up, fix this is very easy to say. But users really know your data. In this case, what kind of data you have, where it really should be, application, filers, cloud, and so on. Make a playbook out of that, very simple guidance within that, and share that. This also that users actually read that and they read and follow your guidelines. The second thing is protect the data. With that being said, who actually has access and who should use that. So your domain users, for example, maybe that's the correct one, but then remove all this kind of like everyone access or guest access. This is also what we quite often find. And finally, remove the devices out of that. Third one is managing the data. Is the guidance, how long to keep the data around here? And then how do you actually implement that? We still see quite often, especially older applications, where there is no tools within the application itself to do that automatically. Let's say we have customer data, customer has left the company, they are not your customer anymore. You keep the data. If you say that that information should be kept, for example, 5 years or 10 years, automatically do that. We often see still within the application, there is no any kind of automation for that, but maybe you have to ask from the vendor to run a cleanup and so on. Only turn to real life. Don't trust that everything's okay. Follow the guidelines, do the better guidelines and follow those and test those with your users. And don't be the next victim of the data breach or without AI implementation. And our natural around here is in GDPR and in privacy laws, the use of common sense is allowed. My name is Juha Sallinen. I come from GDPR Tech. Thank you.